Hi, and welcome to the Financial Modeling Podcast. In Season 4, we explore what makes good financial modelers great. The ability to tell a story, being able to model legal nuances, using the financial model as an effective negotiating tool to close deals. These are just some of the skills we reveal as what you need to know to become a master financial modeler. Season 4 of the Financial Modeling Podcast is sponsored by Full Stack Modeler. Your journey into the future of financial modeling starts here.
Welcome to the Financial Modeling Podcast. Joining me on this very special episode is Rubin from Melbourne, Australia, Bill Jelen, MrExcel from Florida in the United States, and Alan Samuels from Ampersand Advisors in the United Kingdom. And having this amazing cast on the podcast today can only mean one thing, and that's that it's the season-end roundtable discussion of course, our favorite tool, Microsoft Excel. So hi, everyone, and thanks very much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hey, Matthew. How you doing?
Matthew, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
All right. So Excel's going through a lot of changes. It's growing up, if you will. It's certainly adding new tools, and obviously, whenever I start mentioning, Excel and the future of it, I always think of Lance's famous article that Excel is dead. and
Still number one on
Excel,
Google.
And of course, Excel will never die. And the whole entire financial system is really predicated on Excel. It's this the man holding up the globe. The globe is the financial system of the world, and the man is Microsoft Excel. So it can't go. And of course, the other quote I always think of is Lance, actually from our podcast earlier this year, when we said, if people thought that COVID brought the world to a standstill, just think about what would happen if Excel had to stop working. We all had to wake up one day and Excel had to stop working. That would bring the world to a standstill. So a couple of things, to think about going into the podcast, and maybe. Bill, let's start off with you. I mean, been a lot of changes to Excel this year. They've been promoting the ability to share work with teams, and obviously everybody working at home, and we can't all huddle around the computer evermore to see what the person's doing. What do you think about some of the changes that have come out from Excel this year?
Yeah, so the new collaboration tools, and this isn't the old share workbook from years ago where like most of the functionality was turned off. In this case, you just have to save it to somewhere online, SharePoint Online or OneDrive for business. And all these extra tools become available. And it's possible to have multiple people in the workbook at the same time. That's great. And then just recently, they added this brand new thing called Show Changes. My reason for not wanting to share a workbook is I don't want anyone to screw up my workbook, to be honest. But now for every cell, I have an audit trail of the last 60 days. Which is just amazing. Now, in order to see that audit trail, you have to go to Excel Online, but everyone can be working in the Windows version of Excel. So Show Changes, I think, is really good. And the other one, they call it Sheet View, where so 5 people open the workbook, and the first thing that one guy does is he filters to just his records, and that used to filter for everybody. And now he can filter, and I can filter to my records, and somehow it all works. Like he can make changes, I can make changes. He can even sort. And Excel keeps track of it all. I think those are good things for people collaborating. Huge improvements there.
Absolutely, and there are changes, and it's a necessity, right? As I said, with people at home, we can't all huddle around one computer and see the changes that somebody's making more. And this ability to work together virtually is exceptionally important. I mean, Lance, from your perspective, you've been a bit ahead of the game. I mean, you've been working virtually from well before COVID. What are some of the big changes this past year that you can think of?
So Matthew, there's definitely been, I guess more recently, definitely last year, dynamic arrays. The announcement of Lambda is incredibly exciting. I'm not in the inside channel because I don't want to run 2 versions of Excel. I've got enough running multiple add-ins on top of my Excel, but I think the exciting bit, it's not publicly released yet, Lambda. I think that's going to be massive. It's effectively the VBA killer, and I think it'll be exciting when we talk a little bit about VBA, and I'm still a big fan, and there are times when you use it. But I think there's a lot of been improvements from the data side in Excel, I think more so than from the financial modeling side. Now, dynamic arrays is still sort of very new age. It's incredibly powerful for financial modeling. The expandability of models, both horizontally and vertically, in a couple of clicks. But doing a simple corkscrew sum, you have to use the mult function and a formula, and that becomes really complex. So it's not yet where it needs to be, but it's moving in the right direction. So yeah, good on the team. I mean, there's lots to work on, and there's a lot of needy users out there, particularly the most loud ones like the financial modelers, and we're probably in the minority of the masses. So yeah, but look, it's good to see improvements. And Bill, yeah, absolutely. Collaboration is key. We're now entirely collaborating on Microsoft Teams. So the ability to now collaborate on Microsoft Online and just in a shared workbook environment with SharePoint, because of course Teams sits on top of SharePoint. So I think that's meaning our collaboration is no longer in Google Sheets. It's now moving on to Excel, which is pretty cool.
That's a great thing. And to build on your dynamic arrays and Lambda, the second iteration of Lambda, so it's like already gone through its second iteration with these new things by row and by column, which allows you to evaluate an array to find the largest value in a row or largest value in a column. And then the new make table, scan and reduce that allow you to create an array on the fly, right? Those are, I think, for financial modelers, those tools are really exciting. You can generate 5 years of 12 months from a single formula and have it essentially loop through each data point in the array and then surface that as a spilled answer. Those were really, really good improvements to Lambda. You almost wonder how you lived with Lambda without those, for the first 8 months on Insiders Fast. So.
Yeah, and
amazing.
I think the thing I've been really interested and impressed by is Excel Online. Actually, I had kind of dismissed it, but I recently had to use it, and it really is a tool that it's almost fully replicating the desktop. It is phenomenal. And they've made a recent change in the last years, but it's very subtle, but for financial modelers is a game changer. Is the fact they've been able to enable the shortcuts on your web browser. So all of a sudden, instead of me having to click around, I can actually use the shortcuts we all know and love and actually model in a web browser. I think that is amazing, and yeah, hats off to Microsoft for that one.
Alan, you're right. It's possible. So sometimes I'll have Win32 up and Excel Online up, and I'll just Alt Tab into the wrong one. Like I'll Alt Tab into Excel Online, and I'll be able to go 5, 6, 7 minutes before realizing I'm not in the real Excel. I mean, they've made it. It's so impressive from where it started. When it started, I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'll never use this. But now, I mean, it's actually a viable thing, and you can go a long way before you realize, oh wait, this isn't Excel. I'm in Excel Online, right? So kudos to them.
Yeah, fantastic.
And that's exactly what Microsoft wanted, right? I mean, Bill, actually going back to our podcast that you and I had, and I said, where do you think Microsoft wants to go? And you said they're going to continue pushing Microsoft Online. They want people to go on Microsoft Online. And I think they had to take these things into account. And Alan, as you know, every good financial modeler looks very disappointingly at somebody who uses their mouse in Excel. We got to have our shortcuts enabled, and that's very key. So as you say, Bill, kudos to Microsoft, kudos to the Excel team for building in that functionality. And I mean, Alan, how some of these helped you and your team? I mean, deals have to continue, right? Deals still have to close. You have to still work full team. All of a sudden, everybody was working at home. How important were some of these tools like the collaboration features that Bill and Lance spoken about to enable you to continue your work?
It's crucial, to be honest. Obviously, with everyone sitting at their own desks, obviously back in the office, you can be look over your shoulders, tapping them on the side, but yeah, with these collaboration tools, you can see exactly what they're doing, where they're doing it, and as Bill highlighted, the track changes that they've introduced is another fantastic feature. So you can very quickly review what they've done. So modeling was all well and good, but if you can't review it, then you're only as fast as the ability of your employees. So yeah, I think it's been absolutely fantastic. I think during this pandemic to see Microsoft push these tools, and yeah, they're really helping us carry on working.
So the question is, we've reviewed some of the amazing changes that have happened. I mean, the question is, what's next? We're seeing Excel being used a lot by the data analytics professionals as well, and people, that build even Python add-ins because they don't want to use VBA, they don't want to use TypeScript, they want to program Python and analyze data in that and feed it back into Excel. There's obviously, as we've seen, the data tools in Excel have improved immensely. And then, of course, you've got all the tools around the Excel ecosystem, Power Query, Power BI for visualization. What does the future hold? And Bill, let's get an answer from you first. The last time we chatted about it, you said, Microsoft's going to push more people online. That seems to have happened. They've improved the tool. Is that just going to continue to be the case until we no longer realize we even need a Windows desktop version?
Can't imagine we would ever realize that. I think the core Excel team is going to keep focusing on Excel Online, but the Power Query team is completely separate. So we'll get a lot more tools, I think, from Power Query, and Power Query now is part of Excel and Power BI and or Automate or whatever it's called today, right? So I think a lot of investments there. I'm excited about Microsoft Cambridge, which is the research group. They're the ones who kind of brought us Lambda. I think there'll be a lot of work in that area. And whether it's Python or R, I have to believe that Microsoft will come out with a response, right? Something will come out that'll allow us to do Python-like activities in Excel. I don't know how soon that'll be. I haven't seen any demos. I don't have any inside information on that. But it was the largest user voice request before they took user voice down. I have to believe someone will come up with something from inside of Microsoft for that.
Lance, you're a prolific Power BI user, and you built these beautiful financial models in Power BI. What do you think the future is going to be? Is it going to be more of that very tight-knit integration from Microsoft? Don't even build your chart and visualize in Excel. Build your visualization into Power BI. What does the future hold?
I think there's definitely going to obviously remain a place for Excel, particularly on deals modeling. So that's not going to go away. And I think if you think about, for that to happen, every single person will need to move to the same system, whatever that is, at the same time. But I think so Excel will remain and continue to be supporting deals and deal structuring and the ability to do that. So I think fundamentally, although all these other things are great from a data perspective and a data science perspective as well, when the moment you're going Python and you're also getting other data sets, it's sort of not financial modeling, it's sort of more data analytics. So I think definitely the focus now is to deepen the data analytics side. So I don't think there's going to be a lot in the financial modeling side, but I do think that there's technology that is going to continue to be evolved in and around Excel through add-ins and add-ons. And even so, talking Power BI, I did a meetup last week with Danielle on low-code, no-code tools. There's going to be Excel-like features embedded in Power BI as well. So there's going to be like this mashup, I call it a mashup, between financial modeling and analytics, and these two worlds are going to collide. And they're going to collide in a good way and in a bad way. And the reason I say that is if you're a financial modeler and you don't know anything about data and Power Query, then you're in deep water. And for the data people to really understand and see how financial modelers build models, around exactly what Bill was saying, where you can build a model, and just let it spill straight away is quite powerful. So I think you're going to see this sort of meshing up of these two worlds. And I'm proof of it. Or the fact that I'm both a heavy Power BI user and financial modeler. There's very few people that actually in the financial modeling world that see Power BI as a modeling tool. They see Power BI as a data tool. And I think they're wrong. I think there's a big gap. And I actually called that out not too long ago with the blind spot post that I did on social media around, did you know Power BI is more than just a backward-looking analysis tool? You can do scenario analysis, you can do what if, and you're going to be able to do a lot more. So I think these worlds are going to get closer and closer, and they're already pretty close. Power BI and Excel already share two core tools, Power Pivot and Power Query. So in fact, DAX as well. DAX is also in, the three. The three cores are the same. The only difference is the visualization. So these worlds are going to get better and better, and both teams are going to just develop more and more to get that synergy between the two users in the world. Anyway, that's just my view, but what do I know?
Lance, the thing that came from Power BI to Excel for just a few months was the ability to import custom visuals, right? That was working in beta, and then they backed out of it. And I was so excited about that because you have those great visuals in Power BI that, you know, I'm just drooling over, right? In Excel, we're left with these 73 chart types that have been around for decades, right? And it looks so much better in Power BI. When they started to move that over to Excel, I was like, yes, finally. But then it got taken out. All right. All right.
Alan, from your side, and Bill, I completely agree with you, right? I'm a data, as people listening to the podcast know, I'm obsessed with data visualization and fancy graphics. And that I just view, you know, if I want to do that and build some beautiful visuals, I need to be doing that in Power BI, and it would be great to obviously build that into the Excel ecosystem. Maybe they did it on purpose. Maybe they want to say, well, if you want to build fancy visuals, you need to use Power BI. I'm not sure. Alan, from your side, what is your perspective about using some of the new tools? Because a lot of people in the financial modeling space are often scared to use the new tools because they don't want to intimidate or scare off the bankers or the financiers of these deals, right? So I build a deal model in Excel. All of a sudden, it's super fancy. I send it to a bank, and the bank says, well, you know, I don't know how to open this. I don't know how to use it. I don't know what's going on here. Build a simple model. And of course, they're the ones with money, and they're the ones, the ultimate decision makers, and they really dictate what's going on. So what are some of the things that you see? Are people open and willing to use some of these new tools, or are people still building models pretty conservatively because they want them to be used by everybody?
It's a really good question, Matthew, and I'm probably one of the ones running away from Power BI, etc. So in the world that I kind of work in, the project finance, infrastructure, renewable energy world, where all the information you need is within one project. Like, we don't need to pull data, stock data. We don't need to pull energy data from anywhere. We just don't care about data that much. All we want to do is basically work out how much debt we can raise against the project, how the debt's going to be paid, and that's all fairly standard nowadays. So I don't see any real material gain from Power BI in the world that I work in. So I follow Excel, I follow developments, as do my team, and in the industry I don't really see it. But I think the thing I want to see change is that, unfortunately, this is going to hurt maybe everyone on this call, maybe everyone listening to this, is that when I'm designing a model, sometimes Excel is the limiting factor in my design. So as an example, I've got a client who has a number of assets in a portfolio. He wants it all in one model. Fair enough. Currently got two assets. So we will build what we call a one-sheeter. So it will be on one sheet, you'll have a full financial model. There's all the statements, all the revenues, all the costs. So that to add a new asset, all you need to do is copy the sheet. So that's all well and good. You get to 2 assets, fine. 5 assets, fine. 7 assets. Excel starts to creak. So when he's saying, Alan, I want something with 20 assets in it, I'm now limited by the ability of Excel to process that. So I think Excel maybe needs a bit of work. The guys at Microsoft maybe had a bit of work to make Excel a bit more robust. So I know it can handle loads, there's millions of rows, millions of columns, but if it can't actually process, then what's the point? So everything I just described was it's very simple, adding, subtracting, dividing, multiplying. But if it can't do it a lot in the same file, then what's the point? So that's one gripe I have, and so I want to see change. And the other thing I want to see change is, I'm sure some of you guys have been in this situation where you're about to close a transaction, and then the shareholders go, right, I want you to run 50 scenarios tonight. You're like, really? You then need to, so the problem Excel has is that it can't do it at the same time. It needs to run them sequentially. Because some instances we have to run, we have to solve different things, like you have to solve accounting, tax, debt sizes. So you can't, it's very difficult to do quickly. So you have to do them sequentially. So what I'd love to see, and this is probably a little bit of 5D thinking, I hope Microsoft can sort of look at this, is maybe some way that these 50 scenarios could be run at the same time within the same spreadsheet. That would be a game changer for me. And I think a lot of people run away from sensitizing their project, analyzing them, because it takes too long. It takes manpower, it takes processing power. So if they're able to do that, people are more likely to run scenarios, and then so they're more likely to get that information and so be able to make better decisions. And I think given the way that processing power has exponentially grown over the last 5, 10, 100 years, it doesn't feel like Excel has tapped into it. So I think that's what I'd want to see change.
Lance, I saw your eye twitching there. As Alan said, Power BI can't add anything significant. I saw your eye twitching and you're getting slightly redder. I saw Bill almost reach behind him and grab a baseball bat.
No, it's great.
Lance, what do you think?
Two things. One, we're already playing with technology that creates a networking effect of spreadsheets, right? So one of the biggest things in the world of FP&A and Anaplan and all these big planning systems, with OLAP, Cube databases, that doesn't work. It's not scalable, very difficult to code. We're busy testing technology that allows you to create a network effect of a spreadsheet. What that means is in your scenario, Alan, you're actually reusing the logic and the structure of the model, but you can have unlimited number of people using the same spreadsheet at the same time with an SQL Azure backend, and you can push the data through the calculations and get all of those answers back, right? So now you're leveraging and scaling the logic and structure of Excel with a database attached to it. Then you snap on Power BI over the top and away you go, right? So that's the first thing, right? So that technology exists now and some of it's in its infancy. But secondly, I think when you start getting to the situation of Lambda and some of these other dynamic arrays, Alan, I don't know if you saw on my YouTube channel, I calculated 16,000 simulations, in a dynamic array model in 3 seconds, 16,000 in 3 seconds, right? So the calculation speed of dynamic arrays is phenomenal. Where you get into trouble is where you've got things like VBA and the way it's written and the copy paste and the memory chunk. So to me, I don't think it's a Excel problem. I actually think there are other solutions, and we're trying to attack the same problem in the same way that we've always attacked it, which is let's just bloat Excel and hope that Excel copes, or save it as an XLSB format and it shrinks it a little bit. But Excel was never built for that. And if you're going to use it, then use something like Power BI or use a database to do all the heavy lifting in the database and push it back. So I think that's where that can be solved, just not in the same way as we used to solve it. But I can see Bill was also edging there, so I'm going to pass to Bill as well because he might have a view.
What do you think, Bill?
The most frustrating thing about Excel is when you just do an install, you're going to get 32-bit Excel, which is limited to 3 gigabytes of available memory. So, you go buy a machine with 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, and 32-bit Excel can't use that. So go to your IT department. It's the same price for 64-bit Excel. Although I know you might have add-ins that don't work with 64-bit, but if you can go to 64-bit Excel, it's much more robust. When you started down the path of it works with 2, it works with 7, I thought you were going to go, but as soon as we get 100 assets, then the thing starts to creak. And if it's creaking at 7, I almost wonder if you're stuck somehow in 32-bit Excel, maybe because of a corporate standard or maybe because of some add-in that still needs to be 32-bit. But the 64-bit Excel has really improved the ability. And Lance, I'm going to echo you. I have 50,000 simulations, each one doing 10,000 calculations in 30 seconds or less. And again, using dynamic arrays. It used to be 100,000 formulas. Now it's one formula, and it's much faster. Right. So.
Yeah, that's all really interesting to hear. I think that the 64-bit piece, I think the thing we're slightly limited by is the internal corporate policy, and also I'm not quite sure how it transfers to clients. So if the models we build on the whole aren't for us, actually they're for other people.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to investigate that. But yeah, interested to hear how Power BI could. I'm not quite sure how it would run. Sort of the scenarios that I'm talking about, sort of running sort of 5 or 6 processes, then have to re-loop it. I'll be interested to look at that a bit harder. But yeah, that's interesting.
Final question is this before we get into more Excel debates, and Mr. Excel turned into Dr. Excel briefly diagnosing your issues, Alan. And the difference between 32 bit and 64 bit is big, but it's exactly as you say. It's the problem is when you're building models predominantly to run on somebody else's computer, you actually need to be cognizant of what they have. And the last thing you want is to send somebody a model that suddenly crashes their Excel and crashes their computer. They won't be happy. So I hear you. I've been in that situation. The final point of debate is this, right? And Bill, you actually mentioned it briefly, and you gave us a bit of a hint of what your thinking is. But what's the future, right? I think everybody knows that I'm a massive VBA fan, but I'm a massive Python fan as well. I haven't really played with TypeScript and DAX too much. DAX a little bit because I moved out of Excel at the time that it started becoming very popular. But what are your thoughts about the future of Excel? We know that Microsoft has stopped updating VBA for some time. They said they're never going to stop supporting it, or at least it's never going to be out of Excel. And there's too much built into Excel and too much built into VBA. I think if they ever stop supporting it, we'd have a sort of a global meltdown. But what are your thoughts as the future? They're going to bring in a Python-like tool. Bill, you mentioned potentially an R-like tool where people can perform data analytics in a tool that they're familiar with, and try and bring in that data analytics community. You can definitely perform quite a lot of data analysis in Excel already, visualize it nicely in Power BI. Bill, what do you think?
So the fear of VBA going away has been a constant fear for 30 years, right? And I'm now to the point where I can say that it'll be there for the rest of my lifetime because I'm getting up to the point where, I don't need it to work for the next 30 years. I was always afraid of the VBA killer. When TypeScript came out, I turned on the macro recorder in Excel Online and I looked at the code and it's like, hey, this isn't that much worse than VBA. It's not ready yet. It's not as fast as VBA, which is a killer right now, and it can't do everything that VBA can do. But when it's ready, it won't be that much different from VBA. But then, I wonder, will there be some new tool that comes along? Let's look at Power Query. Power Query eliminated 85% of my need for VBA, right? Things that I would have turned to VBA, I just do in Power Query now. And maybe there's one line of VBA at the end to FTP it up to somewhere. But Power Query has already taken away a lot of my need for VBA. Will some other, Python-like or R-like or something like thing come along that will need even less VBA or TypeScript or whatever the scripting language is? So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Alan, in the financial world, VBA is the language, or in the financial world, project finance certainly. You go on any project finance modeling course, there's a VBA component. What do you think? And I guess the question there is, it's not just as you say, you're building models for other people. Will they be able to use it? You have to make sure the banker can use it, and of course, even the auditor can audit the code at the end of the day. So, what do you think? Do you think it's just too much of a push to push into something else? Everybody's comfortable with VBA. Everybody knows along the value chain.
I think that's right, Matthew. I suppose it's the same with Excel. It's so deep rooted. Everyone knows roughly how to play around with it, how to use it, how to read it. And I think a crucial word you said was audit it as well. I think people forget about model auditors. I don't see VBA going away. I know it's got its problems, obviously very early language. But with the models that I'm building and the macros I need to run, VBA I think does enough. It's not the cleanest, but I think it does enough to stay relevant.
Does its job. Lance, from your perspective, I know you're a big fan of DAX as well. What do you think?
So yeah, I mean, look, as much as, and I totally agree with Bill on this, I think a large portion of VBA dependencies been removed through Power Query and also things like MScript, which again, Power Query can do so much, and then you can sort of script even further. And of course with DAX, but I mean, that's more the data side of the world. I mean, we use a lot of add-in technologies as well that actually also reduce the reliance on VBA. But I have to say, it does creep in now and then, and there is no other way to do it but VBA. So maybe Lambda, I don't know. I think I heard, Lambda's meant to be the VBA killer. TypeScript, obviously for online as opposed to offline, because VBA will never go online. But I think there'll always be a need for some form of back-end coding. I mean, it's just the nature of the program, right? It's the nature. Excel is built on, that's Visual Basic is what it's built on. So I don't think that that you're ever going to get rid of that, because it allows you to do things that you can create. It is a development platform, as I said, I think in season 3 around the world discussion. Excel by itself is a development platform, and VBA is the development platform on the development platform. So I think it's no question that it's going to be around, but I think the dependency is going to drop. For project finance models, absolutely, I agree with Alan. Like yes, you can, in certain instances, you can try code around it, but when you have to run so many different scenarios, you simply can't. You just can't. You need to run the scenario, record it, and then run the next one. So, and many times, if you understand project finance, you have these cash flow waterfalls, and certain things have to be run in order. So if you're goal seeking one DSCR calculation, and then you've got to work out what the tax is on that, and then the distribution, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone who's in project finance knows there isn't a simple way around that. So whilst there's other stuff that's going to, sort of get better and probably reduce the dependency on it, I just don't think it's ever going to disappear.
Agreed. And that sequential nature of it, yeah, as you said, sometimes you actually need it, because that's just the nature of how these models are built. Lance, Alan, Bill, MrExcel, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you about Excel, ups, its downs, its changes, and what we can look forward to in the near future. Thank you very much.
The world is changing. Financial modeling is no longer just about Excel, and yet Excel modeling skills have never been more valuable. The Full Stack Modeler is an online learning and membership community for finance professionals who are ready to embrace the future. We created Full Stack because we believe that finance professionals need to master Excel, need to master modeling, and need to master all the technologies around Excel, and even that isn't enough. We also need to master the softer skills: communicating, presenting, listening, influencing. Sign up for our short email sequence at fullstackmodeler.com, and you'll get the chance to do a full audit of your modeling skill set and find out if the Full Stack journey might be for you. If it is, use the offer code podcast at checkout to get 10% off your membership.